Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, I'm going to pull you into the world of biomechanics a little bit, kinesiology, because I want to talk to you about an exercise that for the most part is not only unnecessary, but it's dangerous. And there's really two, perhaps even three reasons why you do not want to do this particular exercise, not only for yourself, but obviously for your clients. And it is the behind the neck shoulder press. Now, I will say that anything behind the neck, and there's generally two exercises that I list as what we call no-go exercises, and that's anything behind the neck with a bar. So shoulder presses with a bar behind your neck. I know I used to do them all the time, and pull down. So generally, when I talk about no-go exercises related to the shoulder in this externally rotated position with the elbows basically out to the side, it's going to be shoulder presses and pull downs, right? So either exercise, they're problematic. And I know a lot of folks will say to me, well, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it never hurt my shoulder, particularly when I would do them. And I would use fairly significant weight. And while I was doing them, I really enjoyed doing them until I injured my shoulder. And I'm not saying that you are going to injure your shoulder by doing it behind the neck, but from a biomechanical perspective, the goal is not just to do something that you've read in a magazine or seen on videos or seen some of the top bodybuilders do as well. The goal with proper biomechanics and exercise technique is to look at the anatomy of the musculoskeletal system. In this case, it's basically the skeleton. I mean, this is really not that difficult to understand why it is a no-go exercise. And remember what I said. Not only is it potentially dangerous, but I said first, it's unnecessary, because instead of doing behind the neck, simply do your movements, pull downs or presses in front, because it allows you to make the appropriate positional changes in your torso, and most importantly, the internal or reduce external rotation of the humerus, right? Which is really where the danger, that's really where the danger lies, is this combination of this excessive horizontal abduction with external rotation. If you remember your kinesiology, the humerus externally rotates, right? Internal rotation, external rotation. If you look at my shoulder, internal rotation, external rotation, right? That is a kinesiological function that occurs in the transverse plane. Now, remember, the shoulder also abducts, right, straight out to the side in the frontal plane, right? So the shoulder moves through abduction and adduction, and in the sagittal plane, right, in front and behind, you have flexion, shoulder extension. So you've got these three movement patterns, but then you have a little bit more complicated kinesiological function known as horizontal adduction and horizontal abduction. That's simply lifting the arms out to the side so they are horizontal to the ground. So there's your horizontal term. And then when they're straight out to the side, bringing them together in front of you, bringing them to the midline of your body, that's known as adduction. So we have horizontal adduction, horizontal abduction at the shoulder. Okay, so now you got your kinesiological term. So what is the problem with behind the neck movements, i.e. the shoulder press or the pull down? But today I'm going to talk to you about the shoulder press in particular, is that as soon as I externally, and this is due to the anatomy of the shoulder joint. It's an interesting joint because you might have heard that it's called a ball and socket, but technically it's not. Basically, you have the head of the humerus, right, which is the upper part here of the upper arm bone. And the head of the humerus sits in this little sort of concave protrusion from the scapula known as the glenoid fossa. So the glenoid fossa is not like at the hip where you got this socket and the hip, the hip bone, right, sits, the femur sits deep inside the socket. No, in the shoulder, it's actually more of a little concavity where the large head of the humerus just kind of butts up against it a little bit. So there is little to no stability. In fact, I would say there is less than 5% stabilization capacity at the shoulder joint due to the actual skeleton itself. Hope that makes sense. In other words, there's no stability because it's not a bone sitting encased in a bone. That provides a lot of stability. In the case of the shoulder joint, it's just like this little concavity and this large ball of the head of the humerus that sits in there. So little to no stability due to the skeletal structure itself. The vast majority, in fact, in a sense, the entirety of the stabilization component of the shoulder is due to the ligaments and the muscles, other connective tissue that's associated with the joint, right? So the socket itself has that little bit, and then you've got the actual joint capsule and all the ligaments. That's where the stabilization comes in. So fact of the matter is, it's not a very stable joint. So anything you do positionally that puts it out of sort of its proper or effective biomechanical position is going to be a problem. Either acutely, right? You're going to do, oh, geez, boy, that hurts, or months, years, decades even of training where you're creating chronic inflammation and chronic weaknesses and chronic instability and chronic this that leads ultimately or potentially to an actual acute injury. So again, because I'm doing it behind the neck, I have to kind of keep my head forward. I have to, and here's the key, is I've got to do two things basically that are problematic at the shoulder joint. I've got to externally rotate. Okay, now right off the bat, the degree of freedom, the range of motion, the allowable range of motion for external rotation can be pretty extensive. I can literally pull my arm back this, but it starts to hurt and my muscles start to. So that's really not the best position to be in. From a functional perspective, yeah, of course I can get my arm back. A pitcher, baseball pitcher, has to have this extensive range of motion to get that sort of plyometric whipping effect if they're going to throw the ball fast. Nevertheless, that external rotation component is a potential problem. Is it a problem if I'm not holding any weight? Well, no, I guess not really. But I'm not doing it without weight. I'm always doing it with some resistance. So right off the bat, the increased load on the muscles, and of course the rotator cuff muscles as well, that increased load now is going to stress the joint in a way that is potentially problematic. Now, I said there was two things. First was this external rotation, but watch this. This is perfectly fine. Did you see how I moved my elbow from a frontal planar position and I horizontally adducted it? That's not a problem, folks. I can be externally rotated. The problem, the second thing, is when the humerus is in external rotation and then you horizontally abduct the shoulder, even go into sort of a hyper horizontal abducted position, meaning pulling your elbow far behind your scapular plane. So basically what's happening is now you externally rotate, and look, I'm doing a shoulder press and I got to put my head forward. Okay. And as I go down, what's going to happen? Right. I'm externally rotated the humerus is externally rotated, and generally I'm retracting my shoulder girdle and I'm pulling my elbows back somewhat. So I'm in this almost somewhat hyper horizontally abducted position. Hope that makes sense, because this position right here, now again, if I go down a little bit lower, I'm not as horizontally abducted, for instance. But I hope you get the point. What you're doing is you're putting your shoulder joint into these sort of exaggerated ranges of motion that I know it doesn't hurt you. I know it doesn't hurt you, and you got great flexibility in your shoulder. I get it. Injuries don't normally occur like that, folks. Injuries generally build or the accumulated effect of improper biomechanics and improper ranges of motion are cumulative. And so you're stressing, you're creating a low grade chronic inflammatory response. Normally when I'll talk to athletes or bodybuilders, it's normally one of these things. Yeah, all I got to do is work it out a little bit and then it feels good. And I go, whoa, okay, hang on a second. This whole idea of that sort of deep, achy sort of pain, that goes away when you train. You feel okay with that? That's not good. That's not good, okay? If you feel it in the muscles, of course, that's one thing. But when you feel that sort of deeper kind of achiness, that is an inflammatory, generally, that's an inflammatory response. And if you've been doing behind the neck shoulder presses, upright rows, I mean, come on, these are terrible for your shoulder joint, for the shoulder joint. And I know, once again, I know what some of you are going to say. It doesn't hurt. It's my favorite exercise. Yay. Okay. I can't tell you what to do. I'm just giving you the science and the biomechanics and kinesiology behind this. If you could take off all the soft tissue and actually look at the skeleton, keep in mind the head of the humerus is not a perfect shaped ball, in the glenoid fossa is not this perfectly concave, perfectly smooth little cavity that sits. No, these things have tuberosities. They have all these different parts of the joint, parts of the end part of the bone in the joint that are designed to create beneficial pulling actions on the muscles. And so you have these tuberosities, these protrusions that allow for that. And those are the things that squeeze and compress the soft tissue. That's one of the reasons why people get impingement syndrome, because they either go down too low or they go up too high, or they are too internally rotated. In this case, I'm not worried so much about impingement syndrome as I am about the other things that I was just relating to you, which is that now when you are in an externally rotated, horizontally abducted position, the shoulder joint now is in a very poor biomechanical position, and it will stress the soft tissue. The other thing to keep in mind is that even though we're talking about the head of the humerus, you got to remember also what I was talking about, the glenoid fossa, which is the part that accepts the humeral head. This is part of the scapula, right? Your backbone, right? At the lateral aspect of the scapula, you have what's known as the glenoid fossa. That's what accepts the head of the humerus. Well, you know, that part of the scapula that accepts the humeral head does not face straight out laterally. It actually curves in a little bit. So when I'm standing here straight like this, the head of the humerus is not sitting perfectly sideways into the glenoid. It's actually rotated somewhat to the front. So it's actually rotated to the front slightly. So technically, the ideal perfect scenario is to have the elbows slightly, a little bit in front. Everybody's going to be different, but those elbows should actually be based on just the musculoskeletal, the skeletal system, just the skeletal system itself. You would want to have the elbow actually in front of your body, right? Because that's the way the glenoid fossa is. The glenoid fossa is not facing out. It's actually facing forward slightly. So the ideal scenario, or the ideal line of pull, particularly for the deltoid, is not to have the elbow back behind you or to your side. It's actually to have it in front slightly. But again, think about how simple this is. Here, go from here, doing it behind the neck, and forget the neck stuff that you can have a problem with. I don't want to get into that. But as soon as I take that bar and I do it to the front, watch my elbows. My elbows will automatically come forward. It's a much more natural, more effective, more efficient line of pull for the muscles, the deltoids in particular, that work over the shoulder joint. So why are you doing behind the neck presses? I don't know. Front presses, right, what we technically call the shoulder press, allows for so many more variations, by the way. I can go a little bit wider. I can go a little bit closer. I can't really do that with the behind the neck press. I hope that makes sense. So if you are married to doing a behind the neck press, stop. Do them to the front from. And by the way, the other thing that is really very helpful is the ability to lean back slightly when you're doing the shoulder press, which is important when you do it. You should not be straight up and down. Your torso should be back behind you, so that as you lower the bar, it clears your face, goes right down, right basically to the top of the sternum, roughly there. Now, everybody is different. At that point, now we're talking about proper technique for a good, proper exercise versus doing it this way, which is just wrong all out. So always do them to the front. It allows you to bring your elbows to horizontally adduct slightly, horizontal adduction. If my elbow is here, obviously I'm doing abduction and adduction, but the point is that I'm bringing my elbows forward from the frontal plane and I'm coming more towards, it's almost like in between the frontal and the sagittal plane. The degrees, I don't remember, 30, 40 degrees, something like that, of out of the plane, out of the frontal plane or the scapular plane. So the idea is that doing them to the front, and by the way, that's with a barbell. It's better, right? It's even better just if you're using a barbell. And then in my opinion, go with the dumbbells, because what do the dumbbells help you do? But that's another video talking about wrist position. Point is that for the health of your shoulders, train efficiently, train smart. Behind the neck press, no-go exercise. Just do them to the front. It's that simple. Instead of pulling back here, just start doing them to the front. And you can pull your elbows a little bit forward a little bit more. So I hope this was helpful. Look, if you have comments, absolutely, please leave them in there for us to look at. By the way, if this was helpful and you understood it, then write the word understand. If you want to also become a certified personal trainer and qualified, by the way, knowing this stuff, that qualifies you, not just knowing some book knowledge, actually knowing how to make modifications when people are doing exercises. That's qualified. That means that you are a qualified trainer. If you want to be certified and qualified, then go ahead and click on the link in the discussion box below. Remember, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button. Make sure that you hit the notification bell as well, so you know when the new material is coming out. Keep in mind, every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. to 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, 6 to 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. Every Wednesday, we do a live exam study. We use Quizlet, and we create what's known as a competitive Quizlet live study. A lot of fun, very fast, very helpful when it comes to moving through your Body Design University materials and modules as well. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.